Welcome to Music Crush, a new music podcast hosted by Flute New Music Consortium. I'm Elizabeth Robinson.
And I'm Nicole Reiner. And announcing FNMC Presents, an album of previous commissions and competition winners performed by members of the Flute New Music Consortium. Repertoire includes works by Sean O'Pevolo, Joseph Hallman, Becca Sims, Cherise Leiter, and others. Purchase a copy today. All proceeds go directly to FNMC. Flute New Music Consortium, Inc. is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Your contributions are tax deductible to the extent allowed by the law. Visit www.flutenewmusicconsortium.com for details. Zaq Latino is an actor, musician, and composer based in New York City. Among their many dramatic accomplishments, Zaq created the role of Darnell Brooks on Xavier Niles' Boyfriends, Season 1, available on YouTube. Zaq is also the founder and executive director of Valid Bodies Arts Project, a 501c3 performance production company committed to identity-conscious casting. In 2022, VBAP produced two shows, A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Players Theater and Dog Sees God with American Theater of Actors to audience acclaim. Although content with a career playing male roles, Zaq is a non-binary person who aims to normalize gender non-conforming representation in professional spaces. As a musician, Zaq has worked with Jack Quartet, Arditi Quartet, and Divertimento Ensemble, among others. Most recently, Zaq was named a finalist for the American Prize in Orchestral Composition for Hidden Lakes. And we know Zaq as the solo winner of FNMC's composition competition back in 2021 for their fascinating work Fitting In. Zaq, welcome to Music Crush.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. Oh, what an intro. That's really nice. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's so great to get a chance to talk to you. And actually that intro is just a fraction, right? I mean, I sort of cobbled together your bits and pieces of your two bios on your website, your acting bio and your music bio, but so many fascinating things that you're doing right now. But I'm also curious about your past. Can you walk us through a narrative of how you came to be this magnificent, accomplished actor and musician?
So I'm a Jersey kid, grew up in New Jersey, and that's really important because of its proximity to New York. I think that I was really privileged and lucky to get to come here quite a bit as a young person. Music really started through the theater. So it's kind of funny that I've sort of come back, and I guess that's something that we'll talk about later, but I've always really been drawn to the storytelling aspect of performance, and so my neighbors actually played for me the Wicked cast album, Wicked the musical, and I was like 7, and it was in the back of their van, and I had heard this music for the first time, like this incredible, because only listening to FM radio and stuff like that for a long time, having heard show tunes for the first time, like that orchestra and just that particular sound was really, really left quite an impression on me as a young person. And for a really long time, I thought it was the acting that I really wanted, that I was kind of obsessed with being in those roles. But I kind of struggled with anxiety going into maybe 15 and 16 years old in my life. And so instead of performing and being like in the front where everybody could see me doing stuff, I decided that maybe I was really comfortable making those things happen from the background. So I did like stage crew and stuff, and that's actually sort of how I fell into writing for the stage, and music is sort of a natural progression into maybe having more control than being a stagehand, right? And actually being in the creation process, but still not having to act, which is something that really was difficult for me as a young person to put myself out there.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that. I figured music would come first, from public school band or orchestra or something. So that's interesting to hear how you got hooked into music from acting.
I think it's important because it's sort of always influenced how I feel about it as a storytelling medium, and not always from everybody else, but at least my output. I very much feel like I'm telling a narrative, and that impression sort of definitely is influenced from the thespian side,
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Tell us about Valid Bodies.
Yeah, okay. Valid Bodies Arts Project is a COVID-19 project. As many of us were sitting inside, we had more time to do stuff. So I really wanted to get back into acting. This is sort of entering my brave bubble, as I call it, when I get really brave to do something. And then sometimes my brave bubble pops. And so I had the acting brave bubble come back once or twice before, and this was my third like theater brave bubble. Like I was like, I'm gonna do it. We're all mortal. Like I have to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
But still too afraid to necessarily be the center of attention. So I thought that my best way into theater was by directing, and maybe being able to be still not the front and center, but maybe doing more on hands-on work than somebody on the creative team or something. So that the initiation of that company was I could maybe have my own production company to produce things that I would then direct. After directing my first show, I really didn't like it. Like I just didn't like the process that much. I wasn't necessarily spiritually drawn to directing that much, but I still had the 501c3, which I have failed to mention so far was initially created to highlight the work of gender diverse people in New York City, with a secondary emphasis on anybody who has been sort of othered by that industry typically. But that's sort of our primary was the LGBTQ focus. Anyway, I had that company still, and then one day my friend was like, "Hey, we should do Midsummer Night's Dream," and it was really somebody else's idea, who's now my vice president, and we produced that first show, and then we were able to do a second one just this past October, and it's been really amazing.
Wow. So have you hung up your director hat then?
I don't know. I don't know necessarily. I remember at the time, after having done that first show, I just wasn't necessarily as passionate about the process. I thought there just wasn't something that I connected with, at least on a theater level. I thought about maybe going back and directing film someday. But yeah, for now, I think I'm not focused on it, at least.
Well, let's talk about your solo work for Flute Fitting In, because we're flute players, so we're going to go there. I love your composer's note. It is so generous and so candid and meaningful. Would you please just read it for us?
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. I'd be delighted to read my program note for you. Thanks. Okay, so this I wrote for this piece, Fitting In, that we're going to talk about. Fitting in is about exactly that, fitting in. As a grad school dropout, I've spent a lot of my most recent career trying to find where my sound fits. Often, when I write concert music like this, which is clearly in the contemporary classical lineage, I wrestle between my instincts and the extrinsic. I used to find myself second-guessing everything I did even before I could write down a single note, and I often wondered where my music belonged and if I would even be taken seriously in the contemporary music circles that I found myself in. What I have come to realize is, who cares? Isn't it the best thing I can do to be true to myself and to share my real voice with listeners? In the past year or two, I have come to realize that this is the only way I'm interested in writing music. And using this approach, I have written some pieces that I'm really, really proud of. Formally, Fitting In is dividing into 3 sections. The first is the reveal, the second is the struggle, and the third is the changed return. Programmatically, these 3 parts illustrate someone boasting their true selves, coping with the rejection of their peers, and then coming out of it stronger than before, unyieldingly themselves. Although potentially biographical, this narrative could really apply to anyone. How many of us have gathered the courage to speak only to be snuffed out by those who disapprove? It is an incredibly difficult feeling, and one that I think I was able to musically capture quite well. This is especially true in the middle section, which features screaming, high-pitched notes and intentionally awkward fingerings and techniques, which convey a sense of hysteria or perhaps even mourning. A special forever thanks to Carlotta Raponi, who premiered the work in Milan last year, and a new gratitude extended to Nicole Reiner, whose championship of this piece has reignited my excitement for new collaborations on works from the past. Thanks for listening.
Oh, that's so beautiful and so inspiring.
Well, thanks. Thank you.
Such an inspiring program note. Let's talk about it. But I'd like to talk about a little bit the specifics of the piece, and then maybe backing up and digging through some of the ideas that you shared in that program note. Actually, Fitting In involves not only virtuosic playing, but a wide lexicon of extended techniques and some pretty rhythmical and active foot stomping. We're not just talking about tap in time here, right? Is this, you alluded to this earlier? Do you think this is a reflection of your acting life? It feels very theatrical to perform.
Yes, I feel like there is a conscious movement towards sort of this new chapter I'm exploring, which is the combination of the both. Sort of this semi theatrical world that's I guess mainly musical. Maybe that's the main focus. But yeah, these extra musical elements that sort of heighten, I don't know, raise the stakes even a little bit. I think that there's definitely a precarity in doing those foot stomps that you do. And as I sort of mentioned in the program note, it's all on purpose. So Nicole, the fact that you play them as written wasn't actually always intended, but you did phenomenally well. That the sort of the idea is the struggle, you
Yeah,
know.
I felt
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and that's not necessarily a new idea.
Sure.
New Complexity has done it for a while, where these scores that humans aren't. You're not necessarily intended to perfectly recreate that. That there's the dialogue between the performer and the written music is more dialogical, sorry, more of a dialogue, that you can interact with it, and it is different with every person that interacts with it. And I think that individuality is theatrical too, that you sort of get to leave your stamp on each performance, and when people do things differently, I love it, because I think you put yourself back in it, and what's more perform based, than something that really shows you.
That's very generous. I had another question about fitting in that was certainly informed by my process of learning it. And it's that it is such a cool place, or a cool piece to both hear and play. I mean, when I heard it, I thought, this sounds really hard. Oh, damn it. Because I have to learn it. It's amazing. It's such a unique and exciting piece, every bit of it. But it's hard. And so what I wanted to ask you, which I think you were starting to answer already there, was, do you have a preference for working closely with someone? You worked pretty closely, and we'll talk about this in a second, with Carlotta Raponi. We didn't work very closely together at all, although you were very helpful when I had questions. You just let me, do my thing and then perform it. Do you have a preference, or are you just kind of interested to see what each person decides in terms of collaborating with you before they perform that piece?
Yeah, I think where I am now is sort of different from maybe where I was earlier, like maybe like undergrad. My whole impression was sort of to let the performer do as much as they wanted, and to have as much of a hand in every aspect of it as possible. And my approach back then was that I would keep the scores really sparse, and I would sort of even like dynamic wise, and I would sort of really give almost too much liberty to the performer, where I was really just marking sections, and it actually became impersonal of myself the more I try to personalize it, to that degree.
Yeah.
So I think now the medium I've kind of settled in is that the scores themselves are pretty packed, without being busy, I hope, but that a lot of what you need is hopefully there, or in the supplemental materials that I'm always happy to share, such that you can do as much on your own, but you're not like terrified, and you're not actually starting from ground zero, which I think only maybe heightens a player's already existing anxiety about tackling a new language or a new venture.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so that's very thoughtful. So it sounds like you've put some bumpers in there in your writing for our comfort as the performers, which is so kind. With any difficult piece, or any particularly creative piece that forces us to, work outside of our boxes, I guess, for lack of a better term, you're definitely running a higher than average risk of it not being representative of what you were hoping for. Do you experience that disappointment much, or is it more just part of the process of learning how someone else makes sense of your writing?
I would be remiss to say that I haven't been disappointed in the past. I think what I'm doing is specific in a lot of ways, and a lot of moments of it. Sort of how to, which my whole thesis really is, how do I combine rhythm with this more ethereal extended technique stuff, which tends to be very timeless, and how do I sort of bring them together? That's sort of the main thing I'm presenting right now. Can you remind me of the question? I'm so sorry.
I was wondering how you deal with the potential disappointments when a piece that you've written isn't played the way you wanted it to go.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.
No, and I think and there definitely is an appreciation of the individual interpretations, right? And I have been disappointed before, but I think it's also just learning what is the limits of what's really possible in presenting that sort of specificity, and sort of inviting the rehumanization of some of those notations, which aren't, if you're playing it in time, perfectly possible, right? So I think it's really a journey that I invite is to learn somebody's interpretation, even if that's different from what I wanted, because that's sort of a part of the sound, right? Is the trepidation sort of become a part of the whole, or the imperfections are the music, So there's sort of this wrestling between absolute control and inviting chaos sometimes, or inviting imperfections, because that's part of the human element, that I like to show off in what I'm doing now.
As a very type A person, that's very generous to hear. I mean, it's a helpful reminder that, sometimes I'm working with a student on, a more contemporary piece, and they'll bring it in and it seems like maybe rhythm is just a suggestion to them or something, like some major part of it. They're just like throwing themselves at it. And I'm like, you owe it to the composer, like do everything you possibly can. But yeah, I mean, some scores really are completely possible to do as written, and some leave a little bit to the ingenuity of the performer to figure out how they're physically going to get from one thing to the next on time. So that's a helpful reminder that that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the whole thing, is the dialogue and the individual ownership of it. That's the whole point. Yeah, for me at least.
The studio recording of Fitting In, I listened to it on loop as I was working on it. And as you mentioned in the program note, it's performed by the Italian flutist Carlotta Raponi. Beautiful, beautiful player. Excellent, incredible playing. So exciting and alive, and also very skilled. I reached out to her during my own time learning the piece, mostly to just sort of say, like, I was crushing on her recording, I think. Yeah. I didn't really have a specific question. I just wanted to tell her, like, this is amazing. And she said that she was fortunate enough to be coached by you before that premiere performance. I feel like I read somewhere that this was part of a competition or some kind of prize that you won, that you got to work with this ensemble in Milan. Could you, but I may be remembering wrong, could you explain this collaboration, how it came about, and were you in Italy? Were you working remotely with them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This was something I found on one of those many composer competition websites that, we do because we have to do them. And that there was an opportunity with Divertimento Ensemble, who's this phenomenal new music ensemble out of Milan, Italy, who have been doing really, really amazing work with people like Mauro Lanza and Unsuk Chin, and just these awesome, really wonderful collaborations and recordings for a long time. And they had unleashed, oh my gosh, they had put out this casting or call for composers, excuse me, for portfolios of composers so that they can write a new piece for soloists in their ensemble. And I believe that in the application process, you actually could select which instrument. And I believe that it was flute, viola, and percussion. And there were 6 of us that went to the program, and 2 people per instrument. And so it was this concert of really amazing premieres to look forward to, and this incredibly skilled flautist to write for. Initially, Carlotta was not supposed to play it, so it was supposed to be somebody else in the ensemble. And I'm really, really grateful that it became Carlotta, because I think the collaboration was just incredibly welcome, and I can't really have imagined it any other way afterwards. And as I say, I'm eternally grateful, because I think the piece really is molded from us working together and sort of making it what it is.
Yeah, no, that's great. You also mentioned in your program note your experience with grad school. And so I'm curious if you're willing to share, if you would be willing to tell us about your time in grad school. You mentioned that you dropped out in the composer's note. It looks from your bio like you did go back and finish. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, totally. I really wanted to teach college for a while. I think that's what many of us in classical music aspire to do. And that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. Not sucking up to either of you. I sincerely believe that it's a beautiful and wonderful thing, to teach at that level. And that's what I wanted to do after undergrad. So I sort of rushed into grad school right away. My main teacher at Ithaca was Jorge Grossman, who's incredibly amazing, vibrant Peruvian composer. who Boston University was his alma mater. And so I was really inspired by his work and the work of Lucas Foss, his teacher, and sort of really wanted to go into this BU Center for New Music lineage and was all excited. And I was really blessed to have gotten in. And I went, but I think I was maybe not sure enough of myself as I potentially should have been. I think there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves. At this age, I should be like, oh my God, I know who I am and I know what I want. I think maybe I should have taken just a year and be like, hey, do I really want to go launch back into school right away? And no harm on anybody, because nobody was ever directly influential on me not wanting to continue, like personally. I just felt sort of like I wasn't doing in that environment what I was meant to do. Like I was meant to get better as a composer and be more skilled as an artist. And I wasn't writing anything I was proud of for that whole first year. And so it was just a decision that if I'm, that for me personally, the degree at the end wasn't enough to sort of justify me not actually getting better at my major or my craft, So I didn't go back, and I still don't have a finished master's in composition. My master's I do have a master's now. It's in arts administration, which I got also pandemic sort of as a little fallback for all the wonderfully secure artistic things I'm always doing, just to have it. But so that's what that means when I did go back and finish. So I have the Master's of Arts, but I actually do not have a completed master's in music degree.
What did you give us a crash course in your MA in arts administration? I mean, obviously you're applying that to valid bodies, I would assume, but were there any? I'm always interested in the dichotomy between like go sit in the practice room and learn how to play your instrument, or write your master work, write your opera. Everyone's got to write an opera, and the actual nitty gritty of how you make a living as a musician, or how you run an organization. Were there any particular gems that you were particularly grateful to have learned in that MA?
Yeah, I think it was a really well-rounded program. It's technically the Masters of Arts Leadership and Cultural Management at Colorado State University, which is just, a fanciful title for arts administration, at least what I perceived. And we did learn sort of the ins and outs of nonprofit formation and management, equally so from how to get a job in those industries for already existing organizations, and sort of how to form your own. And yes, my creation of valid bodies directly overlapped with my last semester at school, and had influenced me to go forward and actually apply what I had learned into doing it myself. But it is incredible how at least for me, the administrative side of anything and the craft have always gone hand in hand. I think, young composers now, there's so much about doing it yourself, and not that I'm always practicing what I preach, but I think that we should be making our own recordings and pursuing our own things all the time, and always sort of putting ourselves out there more and more, and being active with our listeners in that way. I sort of lost my thought. Can you let me know where the question was? I'm so sorry. I'm a little nervous.
No, it's fascinating. I think you answered. I was just asking you what were some gems you learned, or what did you get out of that program? LEAP, right? It's called the LEAP program.
It is the LEAP program. Yeah. No, just to finish that thought, I think that so much of who I am as an actor now is really from the equal love of the applying and the writing the cover letter and the self business side of it. At least for me, I find that it's sort of equally creative, because you're still working towards the art even when you're doing the administration stuff, and sort of that self entrepreneurship has always fascinated me too. That was the end of that thought. Sorry.
Yeah, that was great.
You can add whatever you want. But
Can I kind of dovetail on that? This isn't from our preset list of questions, so if you don't want to deal with it, just wave me off. But I'm really fascinated. Well, I should back up. I work with a lot of students who are trying to decide, where they're going and what is for them and what is not for them. And as somebody who maybe wasn't ready for grad school when it was time to do grad school, I relate really deeply to finding yourself in a program that doesn't feel like the right fit for right now. What did you do instead?
No, so that was my second Brave bubble. As I mentioned before, the Brave bubbles, right? Before they pop. This one did pop. My third Brave bubble's going really well. Yay. But my second Brave bubble did pop. This was I wanted to do acting again. And that's also influenced why I left, is that I was, sort of frustrated by that. And I was like, why am I trying to get a degree in composition to teach if maybe I still have this acting bug that I can't squanch even if I really, really want to, just because I was afraid of the lifestyle and whatnot. So I went back to my parents' house in South Jersey, and we have a really beautiful theater scene in Philadelphia. And I sort of auditioned around, and the Walnut Street Theater is there, which is a really beautiful regional theater house. And I was an understudy in a play, and I did a workshop of another one. That sort of would have been the beginning of my second semester, right? So that's in the fall. So I did do like two plays. And then I sort of had an existential crisis, and I moved to Minnesota.
Really?
Yeah.
Talk about culture shock.
Yeah. My partner's from there, and so we went to live with his family, and just for me to sort of see another way of life and to sort of take a break for a while. And at the end of that, that's sort of when we came back to New York, and just in time for the pandemic, which was lovely. And then the world shut down, and then I took up the online degree, because I was already like academically like frustrated about having left, but I wanted to finish something.
Are you still composing?
I am still composing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about sort of, if there was a break, how you came back to it, and if there wasn't a break, how you adapted as the current circumstances of your life evolved?
Yeah, totally. I've never necessarily stopped composing like in here, you know. I just have a really, and not to be corny, in here. I have a really hyperactive imagination. And I think that's where all of my influence comes from, is just sort of this unplaceable genesis of an idea that just really is organic in there. And so that's always kind of there. If I don't have the time or the energy to notate it or to work on it or to entertain that for a while, sometimes it goes on the back burner. Like, when I'm really heavy into acting,
Sure.
and sort of that takes a lot of my brain power. I'm not necessarily using that composer muscle as much. And because you mentioned young people, I think this is one of the most, not the, I'm experienced enough to really comment on it, but somebody brilliant told me, that we pressure ourselves so much to be everything that we want to be all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of just acknowledging all the things that we are without necessarily like directly addressing them. And this person told me, I'm a composer and a researcher and a teacher, and a bunch of other things that they were doing. And they were like, but I can't necessarily be all four at the same time. Like when I'm working on a research paper, maybe I'm not practicing as much. Or when I'm preparing for a performance, maybe I don't have time for my, professorial duties as much that month or whatever the comparison was, So sort of being okay in I have these interests and these things that are very much a part of me, but sometimes I'm entertaining one more than the others at a certain point, and that's just because of what I'm driven to do that month or series of months or year or so. But yeah, always composing, and it's always there. But just acknowledging that even if I'm not writing right now, I'm still a composer, and that part of me still exists, even if I'm hyper focused on something else right now.
That's lovely. I have one sort of other off script question, and it may not even be a question. You've talked a little bit about, administrative duties, which I guess I sort of catalog as a more behind the scenes activity. But also acting is very much an in front of the scenes kind of activity. How do those two preferences coexist in the same person? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I think it comes from like the love of construction, like the love of putting things together.
Okay.
I was very tactile as a kid, and still kind of am. And I was very my first desire, or my first aspiration, was to actually be an architect. And then my dad told me that it was all math, and I apparently cried for 3 days.
Oh no.
And I would love to be like I was 7. I was probably 15. No, but no,
I love that more.
Yeah, I was like, gosh, I didn't know. But I love putting things together, I guess, and sort of, I love the idea that maybe the person that you see on the outside, like the figurehead of not to be corny and gross and capitalistic, but like the Zaq Latino brand, the thing that I'm presenting is really a result of sort of like a background architecture that I also created myself, like the networking that goes into it and the creation of the website on a practical level, and the compilation of stuff. So I think it all sort of serves this outwardness, right? The actor outwardness, as you said, but really the inner mechanics, that's actually more so like me,
Yeah.
Like that. I love the tinkering, and I think that's why I love composing, maybe, is the construction of sounds, right? Is maybe at the basis of everything, I'm more of an engineer than I've ever really thought I was. I don't know. I'm constructing things. And the outward persona is very much still me and lovely and marvelous, but I'm probably much more quiet and into the background mechanics of it most of the time, actually.
Do you find that there's a need to sort of balance the introvert versus extrovert facets of those two things, or you also sound like maybe you handle it more naturally than I do? I'm just interested in the vacillating.
Okay, well, so I take a lot of sometimes when you're acting, there is breaks between projects, and especially, we might talk later. What do I say? I've transversed more towards film and TV now, so it's a lot of maybe weeks off and then 2 days of work.
Okay.
So I've been really lucky that I have those recovery times. I also just kind of suffer from chronic fatigue anyway, so it's nice to get to sort of stop for a while. But the example I was going to give is we produced Dog Sees God with Valid Bodies, right? This was this last October 16th. And I was, doing a lot of the, like answering emails really early and being, the first point of contact for phone calls and stuff, because we're still a growing company, so much so that I needed a few weeks off. And we closed October 16th, and I did not leave my apartment until November 5th. Like I just like needed to recoup. And I think that's part of, or that should become more normalized, right? In doing really difficult work like this, I think. Kind of going back to what I said before, is that you can't be this all the time.
Sure.
That's
great. I really like a lot of things that you said. I'll go back on script now. Your most recent works listed on your website, at least, are from 2021. We're doing just sort of the beginning of 2023 as we're recording this interview. What can you tell us about your current or future music plans?
Yeah, there is, we've talked a lot about music and theater together. There is like a musical theater project in the works, maybe. I'm working on with my really good friend, getting back into, I guess the genre of music that started it all, right? Is going back to theater, which I had tried writing a show before, and it was fine and lovely, but it was a little immature. And then I tried again. I never finished that one. So I'm really excited to sort of go back to this place, because the storytelling is so important to me. So to be literally able to tell stories like that in musical theater sounds awesome. I've had a few projects, that I'm sort of constructing still. But no new performances this year, right? So that's probably what's on my resume. There's nothing recent. But some really cool stuff coming. So that's what I can tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks.
What do you think? I'm sorry if this is, adjust this question as you see fit. This might be a little corny, but what do you think the music world could learn from the acting world and vice versa? If you feel like these are kind of separate bubbles that you inhabit at different times.
Yeah, they're both so centered. And I know that, absolute musicians are going to argue with me about this, and it's fine. I think so much of it is storytelling. I kind of touched upon that before, but acting is inhabiting a character, and telling the story, through what the actor does, right? And some of the best performances I've been moved by, even if, it's not literal telling a story, or those where the performance really gives the idea of a narrative, or it really gives the idea of something that has started and gone through something and come out changed and different than how it started. And that's always my approach to composing too, is that I don't know what to call it, that anecdote, right, is the beginning, and then the thing that makes you change, and how the beginning is now different, and the best performances I've ever listened to are those that move me like that. So I don't know, at least for me, and at least the things that I love, and I know everyone's different, it's always been that embracing of the storytelling element in both, and how really good music either itself goes through something, or simultaneously also makes you changed through your experience listening to it.
Is there anything in the reverse? Not reverse, but is there anything that you've picked up more from music that you've brought to your acting?
Ooh.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love this question. No, it's great. I think I've noticed this recently actually watching like old tapes of mine. Especially those that are more stage acting influenced, right? Where it's maybe more bigger than what I've been doing on camera lately. Is sort of the specificity of rhythm. And it's something that the screenplay and playwright Aaron Sorkin does a lot. Is he was trained as a musician, right? And so the specificity of that dialogue is sort of going with, he has a meter in his head for what he's expecting and crafting that dialogue to look like, right? So it's a very musical process. And I think that I sort of first had that specificity of how somebody talks in my head. And when I would memorize stuff that would really help me to sort of convey what I wanted to convey, is thinking about it in beats and thinking about it in these percussive rhythms and stuff, and thinking about it as a piece. That's just something that I think that definitely helped me sort of find character, really, is find from where it, as Augusta Reed Thomas says, from where it dances, right? Everything dances from where the origin of that thing is, and how to deliver it as naturally as possible by attributing it to speech or movement or something.
Wow. Wow, you've given me something very new to listen for. Do you have, Aaron Sorkin's done a ton of work. Do you have anything, that is top of mind of Aaron Sorkin's that we could all go back and listen to in a new way?
We'll go back and listen to. I was very, very blessed to see the To Kill a Mockingbird adaptation on Broadway.
Oh yeah.
Really, really beautiful. And just phenomenal. He does The Social Network. The beginning scene of The Social Network is astounding. It's just very, and I mention that because you only have to, go to wherever it is on the line and start it, and it's at least there, but really easily accessible. But the dialogue between, I'm going to butcher this because I'm not prepared. I'm sorry. Mark Zuckerberg, the character Mark Zuckerberg, and I think the female character that maybe the character is dating at the time, are having a conversation. And just listen to the percussiveness of it, and just the specificity of the volleys between them. And he also works very closely with his directors to sort of also integrate the camera perspective into it too. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Especially looking at it musically is really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Go back and do that.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's very fun.
Well, I think Nicole has teed us up for the question we usually ask last at any interview.
Okay.
What are 3 pieces you're listening to right now?
Okay, amazing. This is just pieces. Is this classical? This is music. This is music. Okay.
Any music.
I'm really, really kind of going through like an emo revival phase. I was like an emo kid. Yeah. Panic at the Disco, I love. I've recently discovered like emo folk. Like Bright Eyes has been around forever. Bright Eyes, the band, is sensational. Sure. Listen to The People's Key a lot, which is one of the 2011 album is really amazing. I'm a professional dog walker, is how I pay my rent usually. So I always have my earbuds in, and I just fell in love with Apple Music this year because I keep getting recommended all these new things.
Oh, sure.
So that's been really fun. John Adams. John Adams is really an incredibly influential figure to me, sort of, in that post-minimalist tonality, but also in the rhythm. I think there's a lot of fitting in, which is Short Ride in the Fast Machine, potentially. Not directly.
that opening though.
Yeah. Just the establishment of the pulse, and the pulse never really goes away. And then, the John Adams B section, and then the C section when A and B make something new. He does that a lot, and maybe that was something I just kind of figured out right now in real time, that maybe I'm just a thief. Aren't we all?
Inspired by.
Inspired by, absolutely. Yeah. So I listened to my Father Knew Child's Ives is absolutely incredible, and the other orchestral works of John Adams are sensational. What else? But my favorite is always folk. Joni Mitchell means a lot to me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it means a lot. Watching her get up on stage again, at that one country festival and play guitar is incredible after what she's been through. So Blue is an album that means a lot to me. Hijira, these sort of folk things, which is where I think the storytelling comes from, and where I keep the storytelling alive is these amazing lyricists. Which is funny that I got involved in writing mostly instrumental music if lyrics and poetry and storytelling are my biggest influence. But I wonder, that might be something for another day to suss out. That might take a while, but it's cool that all these things, sort of live together, I think.
That is awesome.
Lucky for us that you create such excellent stories for us to tell without our words.
Thank you very much for that. That's very kind. Thank you for playing it, Nicole. Really, it was an honor that you wanted to do it, and I'm just very grateful. So thank you.
It's definitely, yeah. I mean, thank you for writing it. It's definitely one of those pieces I don't want to put away. I want to keep finding.
That's awesome. Yeah.
There's so much more to, I don't know, marinate.
Yes.
Yeah, one performance of fitting in is definitely not enough for satisfaction. So.
Well, thank you very much. You have full honors to keep it alive. So thank you very much.
Well, Zaq, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Music Crush. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also support the podcast, read show notes, and learn more about FNMC by visiting www.flutenewmusicconsortium.com.